Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our English news edition brought to you by Canal Algérie. First, to the headlines. The President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, pleads for an approach based on the fight against extremist groups and terrorism in his report presented by the Foreign Affairs Minister at the African Union Summit. In Addis Ababa, this year's chairman of the African Union, the Senegalese President Macky Sall, receives Foreign Affairs Minister Ramtala, who handed him a written letter from the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune. The decision of the chairman of the African Commission, Moussa Faki, to grant the Zionist entity the observer status has been declined. Partial renewal of the members of the Council of the Nation places 26 seats for the FLN, 13 for the Independents and 11 for the RND, winning the first 3 places. The President of the National Authority for Elections revealed the list of the new members. Classes are resumed on Sunday after 17 days of suspension. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the pupils of the 3 levels of education are able to join their schools under a strict health protocol. Good evening, those were today's headlines. First in our news, the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, called on Sunday for an approach based on the fight against extremist groups, prevention and de-radicalization efforts to win the fight against terrorism. In his capacity as the African Union's coordinator on the prevention and fight against terrorism and violent extremism in Africa, President Tebboune said in his report presented by the Minister of Foreign Affairs and National Community Abroad, Ramtala, at the African Union Summit held in Addis Ababa, that, quote-unquote, the fight against terrorism and violent extremism cannot be won in the absence of a comprehensive approach based on a deployment on a dual front, namely the fight against extremist groups, but also and above all in terms of prevention and de-radicalization efforts. He recalled on this occasion that Algeria has always advocated a comprehensive and integrated approach in the strategies to be implemented to better understand and combat terrorism and crime at the national and international levels. President Tebboune added that Algeria proposed during 2021 a new African approach likely to frame and encourage the prevention and fight against this scourge via a letter addressed to the current chairman of the African Union, the President of the Democratic Republic of Congo, Felix Tshisekedi Chilombo. This new African approach proposed by Algeria is to give a new impetus to the collective effort to fight against terrorism and violent extremism, taking into account the unstable situation in the Sahel-Saharan region and the worsening of the terrorist threat and other related threats in several regions of the continent. Thus, this new vision, said the President of the Republic, is based on a series of proposals to strengthen the collective efforts of African states and mechanisms of the African Union in the fight against terrorism. It also aims to revitalize the African institutions by integrating new concepts, means and resources in order to improve the African action, said President Tebboune in his report presented by the Foreign Minister. The Minister of Foreign Affairs and National Community Abroad, Ramtala, was received in Addis Ababa by Macky Sall, President of Senegal and this year's chairman of the African Union, to whom he extended a handwritten letter from the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune. Ramtala also conveyed his warm congratulations on the occasion of his chairmanship of the African Union. For his part, the Senegalese president expressed his sincere thanks and consideration to his brother, President Abdelmajid Tebboune, and his support, while expressing his willingness to meet with him soon to work together for the consolidation of the bilateral relations and boost joint efforts to complete the continent's agendas in terms of peace, security and sustainable development. The African Union Summit suspended the decision of the chairman of the African Commission, Moussa Faki, to grant the Zionist entity the status of observer. A committee of 7 heads of state, including the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, was set up to make a recommendation on this issue.
The decision taken by the chairman of the African Union Commission, Moussa Faki, to grant observer status to the Zionist entity within the African Union on July 22nd caused indignation and anger in many African countries, including Algeria, which has expressed a categorical refusal, considering that this choice goes against the declarations of the organization supporting the self-determination of peoples. Granting observer status to an occupying entity is contrary to the principles and objectives of the Constitutive Act of the African Union, according to several member countries, including Algeria, South Africa, and Namibia. Palestine, for its part, as an observer country in the African Union, has called for the withdrawal of the accreditation with observer status granted to the Zionist entity. The African Union Peace and Security Council meeting was also an opportunity for African leaders to unequivocally condemn the unconstitutional changes of government and to discuss development and security issues, and an appeal on the need for a new approach to restricting the Pan-African organization was made. In addition, several countries aspire to join forces to put an end to all forms of violence and establish a new approach to security, stability, and development in Africa.
That was Inez Kalou with the details. The National Liberation Front FLN won the majority of seats in the partial renewal elections of the Council of the Nation, followed by the Independence Front. According to the President of the National Independent Authority of Elections, Mohamed Shorfi, Melissa Kabash has the details.
Following the elections for the renewal of half the members of the Council of the Nation, or Upper House of Parliament, 68 new members, represented by 22 political parties, have joined the Council alongside the independent lists. According to the President of National Independent Authority of Elections, Mohamed Shorfi, the National Liberation Front, FLN, came in first place with 26 seats, followed by the Independent Front with 13 seats. The Front of the Socialist Forces, FFS, for its part got 12 seats, while the National Democratic Assembly, RND, got 11 seats. Last but not least, 5 seats were occupied by both the Bina Movement and the Al Mustaqbal Front. It is worth mentioning that only 2 women obtained seats during these elections. It is also worth recalling that 30 new seats were added due to the new division of provinces, raising the total number of seats to 174. As for the participation rate, it reached 96.22% with 27,151 electorate.
To COVID-19 updates now. 378 new confirmed cases, 496 recoveries and 6 deaths have been recorded during the last 24 hours in Algeria, according to the Health Ministry. Classes resumed on Sunday evening after 17 days of suspension for remote transmission chain of COVID-19. Students from the 3 levels of education were able to return to their schools under a strict health protocol.
After an unforeseen stoppage of lessons imposed by the health crisis situation, schools were reopened, and in anticipation of the continuation of the academic year, a strict health protocol has been put in place. The students resumed classes under strict conditions, marked by the total respect of barrier measures against the spread of COVID-19. Teachers, for their part, are doing their best to ensure the prescribed curriculum by the end of the academic year. Awareness against the spread of this virus continues in schools throughout the country, where the National Gendarmerie organized an awareness campaign across schools to remind pupils of the importance of protecting themselves from this virus by explaining barrier measures. To ensure the comfort of pupils and to preserve their health within educational institutions, intensive and exceptional health measures were taken to avoid any contamination within the school environment. Finally, and to ensure immunity, it is important to respect the barrier measures and follow the protocol that has been advised by the Ministry of National Education. It should also be recalled that tests and exams of the second trimester for the 3 cycles have been postponed and set respectively from February 20th to February 24th and from March 20th to March 24th, which will allow better organization to avoid the spread of the virus.
The sculpture dedicated to the Algerian national hero Emir Abdelkader was vandalized in Paris only a few hours before being inaugurated. The Algerian ambassador to France, Mohamed Andar Daoud, qualified it as an act of outrage. The details with Melissa Kabash.
A sad atmosphere prevailed in the French capital, Paris, followed by anger after discovering the sculpture of the emblematic figure Emir Abdelkader damaged and broken hours before its inauguration ceremony. This violent act was vigorously condemned by the local political leaders.
We are all sad and shocked, notably to the destruction of a sculpture that represents a historical figure known for its great tolerance and an open mindset. They knew that he stood up to France, fought for independence and contributed to the building of the Algerian state.
Considered as an act of vandalism that aimed to affect the human and spiritual greatness of this hero and brave soldier, who marked the history of the two countries, namely Algeria and France.
We have values and we will defend them till the end. Whoever did this will not stop us from continuing our fight.
Both the Algerian and French authorities sent a clear message, which consists on resisting to hatred and extremism by paying tribute to the Emir Abdelkader in this castle, where the opening chapter of the Holy Quran or Fatiha was recited in the presence of numerous citizens, alongside speeches that promised to follow the hero's path. The city has also organized an exhibition that showed the letters exchanged between the Emir Abdelkader and l'Abbé Louis Rabion, the church's priest.
We are not only here to remember but also to act in his memory.
According to the Algerian embassy in Paris, the condemnations made by the French authorities are part of the appeasing dynamic installed by the two authorities.
The resolution of the conflict in Western Sahara must take into account the provisions of the Constitutive Act of the African Union, which emphasizes the principle of the intangibility of borders inherited after the recovery of independence, notes the African Union's Peace and Security Council in its new report on the peace and security situation in the continent, expressing deep concern about the unstable situation in Western Sahara following the resumption of war in this non-self-governing territory. The African Union's Peace and Security Council notes the urgent need to reinvigorate efforts to facilitate conclusive resolutions to the conflict in accordance with the relevant provisions of the Constitutive Act of the African Union. The African Union's Assembly could request the Peace and Security Council to fulfill its mandate on the conflict in Western Sahara in accordance with the relevant provisions of its protocol and the relevant decisions of the Assembly by considering the situation in Western Sahara as necessary at the level of heads of state and governments. The General Director of the Algerian Customs, Noordin Khaldi, withdrew from the 55th Regional Meeting of Directors of Customs in the Middle East and North Africa Zone after the dissemination by the Regional Office of Communication in charge of information of the North African Zone of geographical maps annexing the territories of Western Sahara to Morocco. Following this incident, the Algerian Customs General Directorate issued a communique in which the Directorate presented a radical refusal by the Algerian delegation of the content of this exhibition made by the Regional Communication Office, the headquarters of which is located in Morocco. Still with the Sahrawi file, and in a statement issued by the Sahrawi Ministry of Defense, units of the Sahrawi People's Liberation Army carried out new attacks against positions of the Moroccan occupying forces in the sectors of Hawza and Mahbas. According to the statement reported by the Sahrawi press agency, units of the Sahrawi Liberation Army carried out intensified attacks targeting detachments of the Moroccan occupying forces in the region of Shadimiya and Ros Sibti in Mahbas, as well as the area of Liksibi Lemlez in Hawza. For the first time in its history, Senegal is crowned winner of the Africa Cup of Nations 2021. The Senegalese team won against the Egyptian team after a tough 120 minutes game, which ended in penalties shootouts and a score of 4-2 for Senegal. That was it for our news for today. Thank you for tuning in.